Today on The State of Us, in-person social networks for the win, and how to reduce screen time permanently. Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined today by the one and only, your friendly redneck liberal, and the senior resident historian here at True Chat, Mr. Lance Jackson. Today, we're looking at why technology is no substitute for meeting in person. And when my husband had surgery, our social network made all the difference, according to a journal report. We'll also talk about how you can reduce screen time. Notably, something that our producer, Bradley, actually uses himself. So we have a lot to talk about today, but Lance loves screen time. He loves social networks and people and all that stuff. So it's a day of topics that Lance loves.
That's why I talk to people, right, on this show, because I just love talking to people. You know, but as I read the article, it made sense. I mean, as much as I always don't want to have that human interaction, when I do break down and have it, I usually feel better. So maybe it's something I should work on.
Research shows that face-to-face interactions may feel like a lot more work, but in reality, they're actually more energizing. These days, many of us are reluctant or ambivalent about making social plans. We feel the lack of energy or bandwidth to do so. So we end up avoiding social interactions, even with good friends. Yes, a vibrant in-person social life takes a lot of mental energy. The more energy you spend, though, the more you get back. Like going to the gym, the more you do it, the better you feel. 50% of Americans said they had lost touch with a friend in 2021-2022. 44% said they had missed out on making friends due to the pandemic, and 34% said they were unsatisfied with the amount of time they typically spend with their friends.
I mean, those are some interesting numbers, you know, and I know that most people aren't like me who want to withdraw from society on most days, but those are still some significant numbers when you look at the number of people that are affected by this lack of, you know, in person. I mean, it's like the whole thing of why businesses now, right? CEOs are saying, I want my employees back to work. Maybe this is part of it, you know, and having that human interaction just makes you a more productive worker, a better worker. You know, you feel connected, all of those things. Now, again, nothing fits for everybody. Some of us would be wonderfully happy in our lives if we could work and not have to interact in person with people. But most of us, and this is what maybe CEOs know, you know, just by their anecdotal evidence, that they get more out of their workers and the company's better off when people are meeting with one another in person.
The article provides a nice analogy for this. It says communication's a lot like food. People need to eat, but not all food is equally nutritious. What people talk about and the medium they use to talk to each other influences how many social calories we take in. But talking via technology is like a social snack, temporarily redirecting the feeling of disconnection, but failing to satisfy the need. The desire for nourishing social calories soon returns. Getting those calories often feels like too much work. In a real-world conversation, we must be aware of what we are saying and the messages we are giving off, while following the conversation and attending to our partner. It is complex and tiring, and it gets harder when the conversation is emotionally laden, difficult, or intense. But taking the convenient path is a losing proposition. Research consistently shows that people who rely on social media to combat loneliness experience a stronger wish for company down the road, both over weeks and over years.
Yeah, I text with my family that I stay in contact with quite regularly, but it does then make me yearn for some in-face time with them. I can see that because I've just been My brother's just finished producing a musical, and now I'm helping my daughter produce a musical at a different school. And we've been texting, and we're going just back and forth. And it's like, man, we really need to get together. So we're staying in communication on a daily basis, but it's made us then want to be my brother and I, to be in person.
Dr. Hall is a professor of communication studies and director of relationships and technology lab at the University of Kansas. And he recently conducted a study with some peers where they looked at the subject in the studies and compared face-to-face conversation with phone calls, video chats, text or direct messages, email, and social media in their ability to satisfy social needs. So they looked at all these different things. In one study, over the course of a week, we surveyed more than 100 people 5 times a day, asking them how lonely or connected they felt. This allowed the researchers to see how much participants' feelings changed after they had an online or in-person interaction later that same day. Although all social interactions reduced loneliness and built connection compared with being alone, face-to-face interactions and phone calls were by far the best. In another test, we randomly assigned over 300 people to think of one specific time when they felt either particularly disconnected or particularly connected. Then we asked how much they relied on different forms of communication to talk to their close friends and family. Whether that period of life was socially rich or socially malnourished, face-to-face communication boosted connection and mitigated loneliness the most of all activities.
So we give ourselves credit for touching base with them either through a Facebook post or a quick text or an email or something. We're like, oh, well, we're staying in touch, but that's okay, but it's not as good as. We can't use that to replace it. I mean, we placate ourselves and pat ourselves on the back like, well, I talked to everybody this week, but you didn't, talk to them maybe in the best way for them and you, is what the study's telling us.
Right. Well, it's not all that different from what we talked about not that long ago where, like, for example, we saw obviously with students during the pandemic that a lot of students had a harder time learning, even when it was a video class session versus traditional in-person time. Same thing in the workplace. We saw, Zoom fatigue become a thing as far as people, for whatever reason, becoming drained. And we talked about a few of the things that go into that. Because you might say, well, then couldn't you just do like a video call to, supplement or to replace the in-person? And the answer is no. And part of the reason is because small things like the lag between when somebody says something and when you say something, some of the dynamic that takes place, the minute facial expressions that happen, even where somebody's eyes are looking while they're speaking to you digitally, all of those things have a very sizable impact on the mental energy required for you to stay engaged in a conversation, which is much harder to do with digital conversations than it is in person. Because, again, we've evolved a social structure as creatures over many, many hundreds, thousands of years. And we rely on, and a lot of us don't consciously understand that, all these things that we pick up on in person that you really can't pick up on if you're not in person.
Well, this is like my whole frustration with texting. You don't know the voice.
Right. The
that's
tone
being used.
Yeah.
The tone, you're implying it in your own brain. And sometimes things then fall through the cracks and people are either feel good about something they shouldn't feel good about or feel badly about something that they shouldn't feel badly about, just because there wasn't that face-to-face voice communication, reading body language.
Yep.
Some of us do that a lot. Some of us do that more than others, where we read the body language as to more importantly than the words being said.
Right. Well, there's a lot of things happening all the time that are ways that we communicate. And I think we often think of communication as what we say or speak, but we forget that, like, did you not shower today? Is your hair a mess today? Are your clothes ruffled?
What are you trying to say?
I'm not singling anybody out here, just, general observations about.
I only wore this sweater for a couple of hours earlier this week.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You didn't see me Monday. You don't know I wore this sweater earlier this week.
But that is kind of the thinking, is that, you know, your brain, if it has to work harder, then you get less out of it. They're more tiring. And then again, you start to learn, I don't really want to have that video call with that person. You know, that seems like it'd be exhausting. And it's like, well, if the video call is going to be exhausting, why not just do the real thing? If it's an option. I mean, it's not always an option. I mean, I'm not saying there's not a place for them. Right. Our show wouldn't have continued probably, you know, or been able to continue nearly as condusively if there hadn't been video calling available to us, you know, throughout the worst part of the pandemic. So been there
and while we can still do it,
right,
we prefer to do it in person.
Yes. Yep. And again, some of that's hard for people to pinpoint, like, well, why? You know, and it's like, well, it's easier. Well, why is it easier? And you don't really know, you know, all you know is that you tend to feel better if you did the in-person interaction versus the digital interaction. And again, what the article that
the study
we're
show
referencing is that
is true.
Yeah, it's true. It's measurable. Again, better to communicate some digitally than not at all, but we have to put in the effort to actually do it in person. Because if we don't, we're going to be feeling left like we've only had a snack and that we never ate a full meal, or that we've been eating junk food exclusively. You know, I think we all have those feelings where you get sluggish and you kind of feel like, man, I have not, you know, my body does not feel good. I've not been eating well.
I need a fruit and a vegetable.
Yeah, I need something, you know, I just need to get cleaned out here because this is feeling not good. So, and it's a lot like that with this. Same thing, we neglect our brains, but I think it's important to remember that they're as much a part as our body as everything else, you know. And they need certain things to function well. So,
very true. What else we got today?
Yeah. Well, we also need to talk
kind of
about
got what you used to call a mashup edition going today.
Yes, we need to talk about this article that you and I both saw that was written by Beth DiCaprio, and her husband had surgery, and they found that the social network that they maintained made all the difference, and that there's some real numbers behind how effectively and how healthily people live when their social networks are strong. So really this kind of builds off of we talked about how to do the socializing, but what do you need in the way of a social network, which we talk about in the digital sense, but what about the in-person human sense? Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. When my husband had surgery, our social network made all the difference. I learned firsthand what all the research shows. Patients recover more quickly, mentally and physically, when they have people to lean on. The share of people recovering from injuries who reported these outcomes 6 to 12 months post-injury. So we've got 3 categories here, Lance. Level of social support's broken into 3 categories. Weak or non-existent social support, average social support, or strong/very strong social support. So in other words, what percentage of people in these groups, right, classified by these levels, continued to experience chronic pain? Well, people with 6 to 12 months post-surgery, people who had a strong or very strong social network, only 46.9% were still experiencing chronic pain.
Okay.
While those with weak or non-existent social networks, 72.5%.
I was going to say 46 didn't sound good. I mean, half the people were still suffering from chronic pain, but the number went up to 3/4 of the people were suffering if they didn't have the network.
Return to work or school. Okay. 32.6% of those with strong or very strong networks had not returned to work or school 6 to 12 months post-surgery. But those with weak/non-existent social networks, 52% had not returned. So over half of people, right, who have weak social networks and have surgery 6 to 12 months out, they're still not back at work. 1 in 2.
I mean, that's amazing. But I guess what's hitting me is the number that are still experiencing even with the social network. But obviously you're much better off with the strong social network. And we're working with people on a daily basis where we're trying to convince them of that this social network that you're building up and that we're helping you build up is going to help you through the rough times. And these numbers bear that out. Your success rate of getting through difficult times will improve if you allow people in your life that you can trust and that you will trust. Then you're going to do a whole lot better and recover faster.
The effects aren't just physical, though. They're mental as well. And actually, the mental areas where we see the biggest and most dramatic difference.
Okay.
Depression. Okay. Those with strong or very strong social networks, only 9% were experiencing depression 6 to 12 months after surgery.
Amazing. That's an amazing number. Okay. 9 out of 10 were doing pretty well psychologically if they had a strong support group.
Those with weak or non-existent social networks, 54% were experiencing depression.
That's the biggest gap of much more than physical.
So over half of people with a weak or non-existent social network were experiencing depression 6 to 12 months after surgery versus 9% who had a strong social network. Over a 40 percentage point difference in having a strong versus having a weak social network post-surgery, in those experiencing depression.
2.5 times.
We see a similar result with anxiety. 41.7%, 6 to 12 months post-surgery who have a weak social network are experiencing anxiety. Compare that to 9.7% for those with strong social networks.
So almost the same with the strong social network, right around that 9-10% area.
Right.
But 45 to 50% if it's weak.
Yes.
Man, I mean, and let's...
And that's not that anxiety. That's not like I'm going to live in the margin of error. That's like there's a good chance that if you have a weak social network, actually better than a good chance,
Yeah.
Like there's more than a 1 in 2 chance that if you have a weak social network, you will experience depression 6 to 12 months post surgery.
And that's the other key number, right? We're not talking a month or two out. We're talking about 6 to 12 months.
It's not like I just had surgery a week ago.
That's a year of your life, right? I mean, that you're just going to be in this either state of physical pain or state of psychological pain if you don't have a strong network of friends and family.
The other thing, and this is one that I know you'd be concerned about, is new functional limitations. So I have surgery, right? And these are... what they classify, the way the study was done is these are mild to severe, right? So these are none of these are like just routine. I don't want to say not routine, but they're all some degree of serious surgery, right? So none of them are just kind of like casual. Not that there's casual surgery, but you know what I mean.
Elective.
Yeah.
These really aren't elective surgeries. These are things that you have to do for your well-being
and carry a degree of risk and probably some degree of likelihood that you'll have permanent changes in your life after having this surgery. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about functional limitations, these are a big concern for people when they have surgery of what am I not going to be able to do anymore after this surgery? Things that no matter how bad I want to do them, I just may not be able to do. And I thought this one was telling because it's not that big of a spread, but when you're talking about the statistical likelihood of you having or not having functional limitations, I would think you'd want to do everything in your power to make sure that you have as good a chance as possible of not having any new limitations. Those who have a strong or very strong support network, social support network, 33.7% had limitations 6 to 12 months out, or the other way I'm looking at it, 7 in 10 had no new functional limitations 6 to 12 months after surgery. While almost 1 in 2 people who had a weak social network had new functional limitations 6 to 12 months after surgery.
It's almost
so 1 in 2
for me to fathom.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just like you're reading that. I'm like, I can't even come up with something because it's just amazing. Right when we talk about it, right? The power of people, right? The power of that human interaction. And, we just did a show on human touch, right? Or we talked about it, just being able to touch physically, touch someone and how that plays a big role in our mental and physical well-being. But I can attest personally to all of that. You know, when I'm really starting to get stressed, and, you know, now I'm lucky enough that my spouse just retired, I can look at them as they walk through the house, and I just reach out my arm, and as they walk by, they grab my hand, and I immediately start to feel better. You know, and that's something now that I have access to during the day that I didn't used to have. And it's making it easier. I'm not as grumpy as I used to be, you know, for the other people who have to deal with me.
Yep.
I'm not as grumpy because I'm getting some of that human interaction that I wasn't getting when I was, and I'm not even having surgery, right? And I'm just retired and home by myself while she's working. That doesn't exist anymore. So overall, I'm a happier person than I used to be. I know all those people that know me or listening are like, really? You're happier? Yeah. I mean, you should have seen me before, but it makes sense, right? I mean, I knew it in my life, but what you're telling me is they've done these studies and it's really true. And it's true by huge margins.
Yeah. Well, and you have, I guess, an important note to listeners, right, is you do have two people here hosting this program who are more introverted than extroverted. I know not everybody may know that who's listening, but the reason I bring that up is if you're listening and you are more on the introverted side of social interactions wearing you out, or maybe not having as many friends, you might be worried that you're in this group. And I think one of the important things to understand from this information is that a social network doesn't have to mean 15 people, right? It can mean 1, 2, 3 close, strong relationships.
Right.
So I guess I don't want people to be thinking that, you know,
the number's not important, right?
Yeah. The total number of people is really not.
Oh, if I don't have 20 close friends, I'm going to be miserable my whole life.
Yeah.
That's not it.
Right. That's not it.
You get 2 or 3 people you can trust and talk to and reach out to.
Yes.
Anytime. And even if you don't reach out to them, if you know you can reach out to them if you need to, that's what makes it worthwhile. Those are the real things, rather than, and I hate to say this, but other than 20 fake friends that every time you call them, they're like, oh, I'm busy. Oh, I can't help. Well, I can't talk to you right now. Well, are they really your friend? Are they willing to sacrifice and put aside the time to do for you, you know, when it's not convenient for them? That's the way I judge it. I don't know what they meant in the study, but I know both, like you said, both you and I do not necessarily reach out to others, even though we're in a business where we deal with people on a daily basis. A lot of people. Yeah. It is wearing to us, but we have a few close people that we know we can count on if we need to. And a lot of times it's just that knowing that they're there is very helpful. Yep. And helps us through the day.
So I think the other thing, right, to keep in mind there is that it's about what type of social interaction gives you meaning, makes you feel good, because we all need social interaction, right? The type of social interaction that we need to feel good is different. One of, the things that I most enjoy doing is a one-on-one or at most 2-on-2, dinner or lunch or something like that with people. If there's going to be 10 of us that go out, it's like, yeah, I mean, fine, but that's not what I'd want to do every week.
You'll participate, but you're just going to be more of a silent partner,
right,
in that kind of situation.
But I also know people and have a few friends who that is what they want. Like the one-on-one thing would be okay. Like they're not upset doing it, but they would get a lot more out of.
They get more energy if there's more people, more positive vibes the more positive vibes in the room, the more they flourish. Yeah.
So I guess
you have to know what's right for you, right? I mean, I think that's the key. Right. What you're trying to say is that we know this all helps, but you need to do some self-reflection and figure out, what is it I need? What do I need? Do I need bigger groups, smaller groups, intermediate? Do I need a little bit of both? Whatever it is, but you got to find that mix that works for you and then seek that out.
Okay. So we've talked about, Lance, that technology is not a good substitution for meeting in person, that having a good supportive social network can actually literally mentally and physically make you recover from surgery better and faster. But what about screen time? We need to spend less time on the screens, more time with the people that matter to us. Well, how do we get away from that? We've talked about screen time a lot on this, but there is some new research that indicates there may be an incredibly simple, very effective way to reduce your screen time. And this is something our producer, at least last I knew, has been practicing and has had some of these very positive effects. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. New research finds that switching your phone's screen from color works better than using an app to set limits on your use. So we've talked about...
We've talked about cutting out time, right?
Yes.
But you're saying change the background of your device?
Well, there's these questions we've been asking for years, right? Like, what is the best way to reduce screen time? Well, there are a number of different suggestions. We're aware of, and we've talked a lot about, that Apple and Google have released different applications that try to help smartphone users do that. They can see whether the product really makes a difference by looking at whether or not it actually changes how much time people spend. One of those is app timers. This is a very common one. You can set time restrictions on how long you can use an app on any given day so that, once your time's up, you're done. One of the things, though, is that you can override that, of course. And that a lot of times impulsively people will add time to their app timer, or they'll simply just override it altogether, and then, bypass that restriction. So there's definitely some self-discipline required for the timers to be useful, because the timer's here, hey, you can't use this anymore, but then you go in your settings and just change it, and then it's like, wow, okay. If it's too easy to override your timer, then the timer only has so much impact. And basically everybody that has a smartphone has access to those types of features. It's not that you shouldn't do that. I do that. One of those is Facebook, because I find that it's very easy to accidentally spend a lot longer than I thought on Facebook. So I only allow myself 15 minutes on any given day to look at Facebook. And I've just tried to get very good about when the timer pops up and says you're done, just close that notification as soon as you can. Don't click the add time thing. Just close it, forget that you're done. Do you really need to keep looking? Which is great, but is there anything that's more effective? Well, two researchers designed Lance a randomized field study in which 112 iPhone users were divided into 3 groups, each of which was instructed to activate the Screen Time app on their phones. The app monitors phone usage and can be used to set screen time limits or breaks. In the first group of participants, they were not asked to do anything specific with the Screen Time app other than to simply monitor their usage, right? So just simply record how much screen time you're doing. They also were instructed to put their smartphones in grayscale mode, a feature that changes the phone display to black and white from color. The researchers believed that a less stimulating screen would make for a less rewarding user experience. Members of the second group were asked to set time limits for themselves by using both the downtime and app limits feature of the Screen Time app. With downtime, users set aside time where only calls and certain apps can be used at all. App limits are the things, app timers, that put a time restriction on how long you can use something. Lastly, those in the control group were asked only to monitor their phone usage. So the first group...
Yeah, three groups then.
Right.
Okay.
The first group, grayscale, right? But no restrictions on when or how much you can use your phone.
I use my phone as much as I want.
Yep.
I just have to turn the color down.
Just turn the color to gray.
Okay.
So it's black and white. That's all we get. Black, white, and gray,
Yeah, I remember that. This used to be what TV was. I'm old enough. I remember black and white TV.
And there's a very important reason that color TV made a big difference to the market. Then the second group, right? So first group's black and white, and that's the only change. No restrictions on time. Second group is they have to implement time restrictions and downtime. So certain times a day I can't use my phone and I can only use certain apps for a certain amount of time. And the last group was nothing, just
no controls.
No controls. Just use your phone per usual. The activation of grayscale.
So who did best, right?
Yeah.
Now remember, our goal is what? Less phone time, right?
Right. Less screen time.
Okay.
The activation of grayscale mode immediately reduced users' screen time compared with the control by 50 minutes a day, the average screen time being 261.50 minutes a day.
Do what? 200? That's over 4 hours. That's almost 4.5 hours.
Uh-huh. Oh, you didn't know that? The average American screen time, Lance? Average American time on their phone per day is about 4.5 hours. Well, it's 3 hours and 15 minutes on their phone each day. 1 in 5 smartphone users spend upwards of 4.5 hours on average on their phone every day.
No wonder the students we work with are having separation anxiety when we have them put their phone in a box that they can see in the room they're in, and they still are like, I can't give this. Wow, that's amazing. I've never judged my screen time. But I can't believe it's 4.5 hours. I guess I'm bringing the total down.
Activating grayscale immediately, not over time.
So knocked it down almost 25%.
Reduced it by 50 minutes.
Yeah, so almost 25%. Okay.
Yeah, we're asked only to monitor their phone usage. So the first group.
Yeah, three groups then.
Right.
Okay.
The first group, grayscale, right? But no restrictions on when or how much you can use your phone.
I use my phone as much as I want.
Yep.
I just have to turn the color down.
Just turn the color to gray.
Okay.
So it's black and white. That's all we get. Black, white, and gray,
Yeah, I remember that. This used to be what TV was. I'm old enough. I remember black and white TV.
And there's a very important reason that color TV made a big difference to the market. Then the second group, right? So first group's black and white, and that's the only change. No restrictions on time. Second group is they have to implement time restrictions and downtime. So certain times a day I can't use my phone and I can only use certain apps for a certain amount of time. And the last group was nothing, just
no controls.
No controls. Just use your phone per usual. The activation of grayscale.
So who did best, right?
Yeah.
Now remember, our goal is what? Less phone time, right?
Right, less screen time.
Okay.
The activation of grayscale mode immediately reduced users' screen time compared with the control by 50 minutes a day, the average screen time being 261.50 minutes a day.
Do what? 200? That's over 4 hours. That's almost 4.5 hours.
Uh-huh. Oh, you didn't know that? The average American screen time, Lance? Average American time on their phone per day is about 4.5 hours. Well, it's 3 hours and 15 minutes on their phone each day. 1 in 5 smartphone users spend upwards of 4.5 hours on average on their phone every day.
No wonder the students we work with are having separation anxiety when we have them put their phone in a box that they can see in the room they're in, and they still are like, I can't give this. Wow, that's amazing. I've never judged my screen time. But I can't believe it's 4.5 hours. I guess I'm bringing the total down.
Activating grayscale immediately, not over time.
So knocked it down almost 25%.
Reduced it by 50 minutes.
Yeah, so almost 25%. Okay.
Yep.
That's good.
Those who were asked to set time limits showed a more gradual reduction in screen time, perhaps indicating participants became better over time at reaching their time limit. This group's average reduction in screen time was not significantly lower than that of the control group. So, in other words, the control group was just, all we're doing is tracking your time. That's it.
Right.
We're not, but you can just do whatever you want. The reduction, because you knew your time was being tracked, was basically almost indistinguishable from setting actual time limits on the app. However, Dr. Zimmerman says it surprised her how effective the use of grayscale was at reducing screen time, especially since it was in their own hands to what extent they implemented the tools. Also surprising was a lack of evidence supporting the theory that increased screen time equates to a poorer sense of well-being. Dr. Zimmerman says she believes more than overall screen time is involved. Other factors include what applications are used and whether users are actively engaged or passively scrolling, in addition to personal characteristics.
If you have less screen time, talking about our earlier segments today, that would give you more time to have human interaction. Almost an hour a day, right? I mean, that you could possibly have real human interaction rather than just on a device.
Yep. Well, that was a big thing. I mean, you think about what took off with TVs, becoming something that is ubiquitous in the American household. If you look at the introduction of color television and the subsequent decades following, there's a very good likelihood that if our TVs had stayed black and white and we're still black and white today, the whole advent of how long we spend in front of them would be substantially less. It's the same reason that newspapers, as soon as they could, started printing their front page in full color versus just in black and white. Why? Because people were more likely to pick up the paper and read the stories if they were printed in color. And today, I don't know if you've noticed this, Lance, and a lot of our listeners probably don't even read newspapers, but almost the entire paper is full color.
Right.
Very few pieces in the paper have any black and white. And I mean, it wasn't even that long ago. We're talking like 10 years ago when we started doing this show that the only things in color were the front page, and everything else was in black and white. Well, it costs more to print it all in color. Yep. But guess what? People read more of it and they see more of the ads. So,
and that's the whole thing, right? You're making money off of selling the ads. So you have to go to your businesses and say, we've got more people reading more of our stories so that they'll buy the ads. So yeah, I mean,
it doesn't change the content at all.
Exactly.
You don't put any limit on yourself.
Doesn't change the story, doesn't change the people in the picture, doesn't change any of that, but more people will look at it and read it, and therefore you can charge more for advertising. I mean, I think that's that connection that most of us don't stop to think about that makes total sense. Because when you think about us older people who are always putting down the younger generation for looking at their phone, well, how many hours do you spend in front of the boob tube, right? Mm-hmm. How much time do you spend in front of the idiot box just having it on, And
because the average total screen time in the United States, Lance, across all platforms, so not just phones, is 7 hours and 4 minutes a day.
Well, and if you're those weird people, pun intended here, that get 8 to 10 hours of sleep a day, I get 5. So I think, therefore, I should get maybe a few extra hours because I only sleep about 5-6 hours a day. But if you get 8 hours of sleep, that means a third of your day is sleeping, a third of your day is looking at a screen. And what are you doing with the other third? And then you wonder, well, why am I not getting stuff done during the day? Why am I always behind? Well, you sleep a third of the day, right? If you're watching a screen a third of the day, you're only giving yourself, and that doesn't count, shower, bathroom time,
right?
Eating meals,
all the prerequisites,
all the things you have to do during the day that your body, makes you do or you need to do. You're only really working, you're down to maybe 6 hours, 5 hours max that you actually have time to get something productive done. No wonder many of us, our list just seems to get longer and longer.
So, Lance, there was a reason we had this show today, right?
Black and white. Cut out your screen times, people.
Black and white. I'm going to give it a go. I've decided I'm going to give it a go. My screen time's already tracked right now. I actually have a thing on the home screen of my phone,
right,
that shows me basically in real time how much